Chapter 871. A dazzling diamond ring was lying quietly on the velvet box. "Are you willing to wear it for me and become Mrs. Feng?" The man's eyes were so affectionate that the tenderness in his eyes could almost condense into substance. Gu Shengyin looked down for a while and didn't say anything. Feng Cheng was a little anxious. He thought there would be no problem, but it seemed that Lian Yang wasn't willing to do it. He was a little uneasy in his heart. He was sure that Lian Yang's heart was with him, and he was the person she cared about most in the world now. What was wrong? Gu Shengyin secretly admired the man's changing expression, and then slowly said, "The proposal I saw on TV was not like this. Where were the flowers? Where was the dinner? Where was the affectionate confession on one knee? Proposing on the bed in such a hasty way?" Feng Cheng got her meaning in a second. His heart was relieved, and he couldn't help laughing. It turned out that this was the reason. He leaned over and kissed Gu Shengyin, and then took the ring box back. Gu Shengyin, who had seen enough and wanted to reach out her hand, was speechless. "Baby, rest for a while. I'll make breakfast for you." Feng Cheng quickly got up from the bed and began to put on his clothes. Gu Shengyin also felt that her body was still very sore, so she closed her eyes and fell asleep again. She was woken up by Feng Cheng. "Baby, Lian Yang?" She hummed twice, turned over and buried herself in the quilt, wrapping herself into a ball. Feng Cheng looked at her like this, and only felt that his heart was about to burst with bubbles. But he still took her out of the quilt. "You should eat." Gu Shengyin groggily got up to wash up, and then opened the door. She instantly woke up from her drowsiness. She didn't know when the living room was covered with red roses, and countless passionate red roses were arranged in the shape of "I love you" in the middle of the living room. Even the floor of the living room was covered with a layer of fragrant and soft rose petals. Gu Shengyin's mind flew away for a moment. How did it feel to roll on the floor full of petals? He retracted his thoughts. Exquisite food was already laid out on the table next to him, waiting for the host to taste it. Beside the table stood a man in a meticulous suit, holding a rose in his hand. Feng Cheng looked at her and smiled. He walked in front of her and knelt down on one knee. "I know it's a little rushed, but I really can't take it anymore. I can't wait to announce to the world that you're mine." Feng Cheng raised his head and looked at her. "Are you willing to give me this opportunity, to let my name and life be connected to yours?" This huge surprise made Gu Shengyin somewhat unable to react. Just now when she was sleeping, this man was doing this? Actually, she was just saying it casually. However, with a man who could take her casual words so seriously, what was there to hesitate about? Gu Shengyin smiled and reached out her hand. Feng Cheng was pleasantly surprised and carefully put the ring on her finger. After the meal, he dragged her to the marriage registration office. No resident status? Not of legal marriageable age? The real tycoon Feng Cheng said that it was not a problem. He had prepared everything early. The only thing he lacked was the baby in his arms nodding her head. At night, Gu Shengyin fiercely experienced what it felt like to roll on the floor full of petals. Feng Cheng gently bit her ear. "When I saw this, I thought that my Lian Yang would be naked in the sea of roses, covered with bright red flower juice and marks left by me. It must be very beautiful." Chapter 872. The two of them spent the first night and the second day in bed after receiving their marriage certificate. On the third day, Feng Cheng called his mother and told her that he would take her daughter-in-law to see her. Zhu Yanyu had been curious about this daughter-in-law for a long time. Feng Cheng had hidden her for 2 years since he told her about it. When Gu Shengyin was about to turn her eyes black, Feng Cheng raised his hand to stop her. "It's okay. This color is beautiful." Gu Shengyin could freely change the color of her hair and eyes after she turned into a human. After all, dark blue hair and green eyes were too eye-catching. However, Feng Cheng liked to see her original appearance the most. He never let her change at home. Gu Shengyin thought for a while. Green eyes were not too much. Many mixed-race people also had such eyes. She nodded and said nothing. Zhu Yanyu saw Gu Shengyin for the first time. "This girl is too beautiful." She had lived for so many years and had seen a lot of beautiful girls, whether they were from home or abroad. However, none of them could compare with the exquisiteness of her predecessors. It was no wonder that even a person like his son would treat her like a treasure and hide her away. She thought subconsciously. Then her second reaction was, "This girl looks so young." She asked her son to help her while she was serving the fruit. She asked quietly, "Am I afraid that my daughter-in-law is an adult?" Fengqing smiled. "Mom, I just took Lian Yang to get the marriage certificate. What do you think?" Zhu Yanyu, she knew her son well. She glanced at Fengqing. "You have cheated such a young girl. You have to treat her well." Fengqing. "Mom, don't worry. She is my heart." Zhu Yanyu took a careful look at her son. When he said those words, the deep affection that flashed in his eyes made her feel moved. This was good. She had been worried that her son would not find a considerate person in his life. Now it seemed that she could rest assured. Her mother-in-law was easier to get along with than Gu Shengyin had imagined. She did not get angry when she found out that the two of them had gotten their marriage certificate behind her back. She just blamed her son for not having a proper wedding. Fengqing readily admitted his mistake and said that he would hold the grandest wedding immediately. Then, the mother and son began to excitedly discuss the best place to hold the wedding, which etiquette team to invite, which designer to design the dress. Gu Shengyin sat quietly by the side and listened. She only felt that time was infinitely beautiful. It was such a beautiful day. Every day was as happy as a vacation. The only bad thing was that Xiao Zi was still jumping around. After spending 2 years with that young master and being pampered by him, Xiao Zi's heart had grown bigger. In the past, Xiao Zi was cautious and knew her limits. But in the past few years, she had become arrogant. She still did not give up on the film and television industry. In addition to that young master, she even began to contact some people in other circles. She thought that the big shot who wanted to ban her in the past might be too busy to remember her. Gu Shengyin said that she was pretentious. Originally, her life was not bad because the young master pampered her. But she was unwilling to be lonely. Gu Shengyin did not do anything. She just divided some of her achievements over the years into several parts. One part was given to the young master, and the other part was given to Bai Gang, who spent almost all his income on Xiao Zi. Chapter 873. It was said that this matter had caused quite a stir in Yuan City. The young master was furious when he saw those photos. It was true that he liked Xiao Zi, but he only saw her as a girlfriend. He didn't love her to death. Moreover, even if he loved Xiao Zi to death, he would be disheartened when he saw these photos. The woman he had doted on for 2 years was willing to go to another old man's bed. She even had a boyfriend that she had been dating since university. From the beginning to the end, his head had been covered in green clouds. The young master was furious. He sent someone to investigate and found out that Xiao Zi was doing this for fame and wanted to return to the entertainment industry. "Very well," he sneered. "Didn't you want to be famous? I'll let you be famous." The next day, a set of high-definition and censored photos began to spread wildly on the internet. The men in the photos were all pixelated, but it was clear that they were different people from their skin color and body shape. The only similarity was that the female lead was the same person. Xiao Zi had disappeared from the public for a long time, and the netizens didn't know who she was. However, this didn't stop them from gossiping. These photos were very explicit, and even the private parts were exposed. Although the relevant websites quickly dealt with it, more photos were circulated through various channels. The power of the internet was great. Soon, Xiao Zi's information was dug up by the netizens. They even knew what kind of small role she had played and which brand of drinks she had endorsed. Because of the young master, the company that hadn't terminated Xiao Zi's contract immediately announced that Xiao Zi's contract had ended long ago. From then on, the two parties would have nothing to do with each other. Xiao Zi was truly enraged, but not in the way that she wanted. Now, whether it was chatting on social media or anonymous forums, as long as they talked about relevant content, everyone would tacitly smile. Xiao Zi didn't even dare to leave her house. The landlord of the house she rented also recognized her. He directly said that her living here had a great impact on his reputation. If others found out about this house, no one would dare to use it in the future. He tactfully asked her to leave. Xiaozi didn't dare to look for that young master. She wrapped herself up tightly and went to look for Bai Gang. In her heart, this man had always been dead set on her. Even if something like this had happened to her, he would definitely not be willing to give up on her. However, when she opened the door, she was greeted by Bai Gang, whose eyes were bloodshot, and an angry shout, "Scram!" Bai Gang spent a lot of effort to restrain himself from strangling this woman. He had loved the woman for so many years. He wanted to treat her well in the future. He wanted to marry her, have children, and spend the rest of his life with her. She turned out to be such a promiscuous bitch. Xiaozi, you disgust me. When Xiaozi returned, she was knocked unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself tied to a chair. In front of her was the young master who always smiled at her. There was still a smile on the young master's face, but there was no warmth in it. "You're good. You're the first woman who dares to play me like this." The young master looked at the eager crowd behind him and said, "This B** TCH likes to mess around. You guys treat her well. Remember, you must make her feel good." Chapter 874. The director's case eventually alerted the police. It was said that it was related to the suicide of a female celebrity a few years ago. At that time, the incident was suppressed. Now that it was brought up again, anyone with a discerning eye would immediately connect the dots. Gu Shengyi knew that the director would not appear again. Sure enough, the media only reported on the matter after that, but no one ever saw the director again. Bai Gang left the Yuan city that he had worked so hard in for so many years. This was his own choice. He left his passion, youth, and love for many years here, but in the end, he only received a bleak ending. Those dark, dirty things could not touch Gu Shengyin at all. She received a perfect wedding, a perfect love, and a filial husband. Feng City's friends, relatives, and people in the company finally saw the rumored Feng City's girlfriend. Alice stood elegantly in the corner in a blue off-the-shoulder gown. It was the chairman's wedding. As the general assistant, of course she had to come to eat and drink. Ah no, to give her blessings. This tall, beautiful general assistant, who exuded the aura of a mature sister, was smiling as she communicated with her female companion beside her. If there were any employees of the phone corporation, they would recognize that the other person was the sales manager who broke the phone corporation's business record. She was also a famous career woman in the business world. Onlookers thought that the two were talking about such a high-end topic. After all, the smiles on their faces were so reserved. However, if someone approached at this time, they would hear, "No wonder Chairman Feng has been so proud these 2 years. Even his aura has softened a lot. It turns out that he has such a beautiful fiancée." Alice sighed. "If it were me, with such a beautiful girlfriend, I would also spoil her to the heavens." The sales manager next to her wanted to say something but stopped. "How do you think our chairman's wife grows up? It's all made up of genes. Is her gene arrangement so scientific? Such a beautiful and cute girl like a porcelain doll. I also want to adopt one. Think about it. Give her a bed slam, then smile wickedly and make her cry and beg for mercy. This kind of scene is really exciting." The sales manager finally couldn't take it anymore and interrupted Alice's fantasy. "Alice, I have to tell you a serious truth." Alice looked at her in confusion. The sales manager revealed a standard 8-tooth smile and pointed behind him. "This handsome guy has been standing behind us for a long time. We seem to be blocking his way." The waiter, who was wearing a waiter's uniform and carrying a tray of champagne, walked past Alice with a blank expression on his face. Alice was speechless. Her face was unbearable to look at. "That handsome guy's expression seems to have been refreshed by me." The sales manager smiled mysteriously. Poor Alice didn't know that the young man wasn't the only one who heard her words. Gu Shengyin repeated what she heard to Fengqing without missing a single word. Fengqing tightened his grip on Gu Xingyin's waist. Very good. Look at me. As an assistant, I have too much time on my hands. That's why I have the time to look at all these random things. Fengqing smiled a little coldly. Coincidentally, Alice was looking in his direction. Gu Xingyin smiled at her from afar without any sympathy. Alice was still intoxicated by the beauty of the chairman's wife. She had no idea how hot her days would be in the future. Chapter 875. Gu Shengyin lived a very happy life in this world. Fengqing spoiled her to the heavens. He would not even give her the moon if she wanted the stars. She was the envy of all the single dogs. Everyone knew that Origin City's Feng clans Feng Cheng and Madame had a deep relationship. No matter what they did, they had to do it together. It was just that this mysterious Mrs. Feng rarely appeared in front of outsiders. Even the media rarely took photos of her. It was said that Mrs. Feng was a great beauty. Fengqing did not want too many people to see her. In fact, it was just because Gu Shangyin did not age for many years. He was afraid of attracting attention from the outside world. 20 years later, Fengqing's hair had turned white, and there were fine lines at the corners of his eyes. However, 20 years later, Gu Shengyin still looked the same as when they first met. The lifespan of a mermaid was as long as 1,000 years. 20 years was just a very, very small part of her lifespan. Sometimes, Fengqing would look at Gu Shengyin and hesitate to say something. However, he did not say it in the end. Until that time, the two of them returned to the private island where they were on vacation. It was here that Gu Shengyin clearly expressed her feelings for him. The two of them officially entered the stage of passionate love. Lian Yang, Fengqing looked at Gu Shengyin, who was playing in the sea, and said softly. She was very far away, but he knew she could hear him. If I leave one day, go far away. Go to the sea, go to the place where you belong, he said slowly. He used to be very selfish. In the beginning, he thought that if he left one day, he would let her accompany him. But how could he bear to? She was the treasure in his hands. He was not willing to let her suffer even a little bit of harm. He was not willing to let her shed a single tear. How could he bear to? Gu Xingyin's movements paused slightly. A drop of pearl fell from her eye socket and fell to the bottom of the sea. She did not turn back, nor did she answer Fengqing's question. After that, the two of them had a tacit understanding and did not mention this issue again. Another 20 years had passed. Even though Fengqing paid attention to its maintenance, its lifespan had reached its end. The two of them had no children. When Fengqing left, the only one who stayed by his side was Gu Shengyin. Looking at his wife's young and beautiful face, Fengqing raised his hand with great effort and touched his favorite pair of green eyes for the last time. Lian Yang, remember our agreement. Gu Shengyin held his hand tightly without saying a word. Fengqing closed his eyes with a smile. The funeral in Feng City was very grand. Throughout the whole process, the noblewoman wearing a black veil and a silly hat of the same color stood quietly at the front, watching her husband rest in peace. She donated all of the Feng family's assets to charity. After that, no one saw the shadow of this madam of the Feng family. Gu Shengyin hugged Fengqing's urn and fell asleep in the deep sea. This time, the huge clamshell was closed forever. One day in the future, there would not be a fated person who would watch the 1,000-year-old mussel open by itself and reveal a blue-haired, blue-eyed mermaid inside. Immortal for 1,000 years. I will sleep with you forever. Gu Shengyin felt that she had slept for a long time. When she woke up, she even put her hands in front of her chest out of conditioned reflex, as if she was holding something there. She was stunned for a moment. Then she realized that she was in the space, lying on the bed that she had created herself. Chapter 876. Gu Shengyin stared blankly for a moment, before realizing that she had completed the mission and returned to the space. She habitually reached out her hand. It was still that little kingfisher. This time, it successfully opened its eyes, but it couldn't stand up, let alone spread its wings and fly. She somewhat dejectedly put down her hand. That little kingfisher turned into a white light and disappeared. System, just how much longer do I need before I can truly walk out? Gu Xingyi's mood was inexplicably a bit irritated. She had experienced more and more life and death, but her heart never felt numb because of it. Instead, it was more than before that she wanted to truly meet her lover. She didn't want to possess any person in any world. Instead, she wanted to truly use her own body, with all her memories, to be together. The system calmly analyzed, the host is already the most talented person I've ever seen. How could she not be the most talented? Everything about her was created by that person bit by bit. Everything was perfect. Gu Shangyin didn't immediately request to go to the mission world this time. Instead, she stayed in the space where she was born for 3 whole days. She needed to calm her emotions. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would go into the mission with a bad mood. This was clearly not the quality that a qualified mission executor should have. 3 days later, she smiled and said to the system, "Let's go to the next world." Gu Shengyin woke up in a very large room. She didn't get up. Instead, she quietly received the storyline memories from this world. The original Ling Su was born with a congenital deficiency. After so many years of recuperation, although there weren't any major problems, she was still much weaker than normal people. Because of her body, Ling Su couldn't be as energetic as a normal child. She could only learn some quiet things like drawing and music. Her parents passed away one after another when she was 13 years old, leaving her alone. After that, Ling Su fell seriously ill and dropped out of school. Before her father passed away, he had found a legal guardian for her. That person was basically hired by Ling Su's father. Before Ling Su turned 18, he would make all the plans for her. After she became an adult, Ling Su would decide whether she wanted to continue hiring him. Because she had been sick since young, Ling Su had developed a gentle temperament. She held the greatest kindness towards everything in the world and loved to take care of flowers and plants. Usually, when she saw some stray cats and dogs, she would try to find someone to take care of them. Such a girl should have received the kindest and best treatment in the world. However, there was one person. She was originally like Ling Su, a young miss from a well-off family. Both of her parents had passed away. However, her parents, who had passed away in an accident, were unable to arrange everything for her future. She was taken away by a family of relatives with ulterior motives. The result was obvious. Her biological uncle had taken over the huge amount of assets left behind by her parents, but he was extremely harsh to his only niece. That girl was called Tong Yuan Yuan. From a young age, Tong Yuan Yuan had learned to observe people's expressions and to disguise herself. She knew how to make others like her and give herself a better reputation. She was multi-talented, gentle, and kind. She was the most gentle and beautiful girl in the eyes of many people. Originally, the two of them didn't have much interaction until Tong Yuan Yuan found out about Ling Su's existence. Chapter 877. At first, she was interested in the similar lives of the two. Later, she was interested in Ling Su's personality. Tong Yuan Yuan never believed that there was such a kind person in the world. It was all just a pretense. Just like herself. In everyone's eyes, she was such a gentle and kind girl who couldn't bear to see anything pitiful. But only she knew how much she hated this kind of pretense. When she held the hands of beggars on the roadside, she felt disgusted, but she had to keep smiling. When she bathed the stray cats, she wanted to drown the damn disobedient animals. Look, she was actually such a person. But everyone only saw the kind Tong Yuan Yuan. Because this kind of Tong Yuan Yuan would be liked by more people. She felt that Ling Su was most likely like herself, pretending to be kind and weak. She slowly got to know Ling Su. Originally, she wanted to tear off her mask and reveal the ugly side of her heart. But after really understanding her, Tong Yuan Yuan helplessly found that Ling Su was really different from her. This girl who liked to wear a plain white dress was gentle and kind, just like her name. She wasn't faking it. She was really facing this world with the best mentality. And this kind of beauty made Tong Yuan feel that she was so unbearable. She was unwilling. Why, with the same experience, why could she live such a simple and innocent life, but she could only fall into the dirty abyss from a young age and become a person that even she hated? She wanted to dye the pure white fabric of Ling Su's dress with mixed colors. Don't you like those cats and dogs the most? You even specially spent money to rent a special house and hired professionals to take care of them? If they get into an accident because of you, what will happen to you? The animal home that Ling Su used to take care of the stray cats and dogs suddenly had a plague. When Ling Su went to the hospital for a routine checkup and received the news, she saw corpses being carried out one by one. The other animals that were still alive were also forcibly taken to the veterinary hospital for a checkup. Ling Su didn't understand. She had checked every stray cat and dog. Why did the plague suddenly break out? She didn't have many friends. Those animals were her best companions. Their deaths were undoubtedly a huge blow to her. Ling Su fell ill that day when she returned home. Not only that, but there were all kinds of rumors that said she was pretending to be kind and fishing for fame. She was the one who killed those poor animals. Even the media was alarmed and specially came to interview her. The reporters were blocked by her guardian, but this matter remained in Ling Su's heart. Her small house was forcibly closed. Some of the kittens and dogs and cats she raised were sent to the cat kennels, some were adopted, and some became strays again. 2 weeks later, Tong Yuan came to see her. She showed her some photos, and Ling Su's face turned pale the moment she saw them. It was a few photos of an operating table. A few doctors in white coats and masks were holding bloody knives in their hands. And on the test table in front of them were the bloody corpses of the animals. Ling Su knew that those animals came out of her small house. Look, it's all your fault that they became like this. Tong Yuan looked at her and smiled maliciously. If it weren't for you, they would still be wandering the streets. At least, they wouldn't have to face such treatment. Ling Su's. Chapter 878. Ling Su's illness came very quickly. By the time her legal guardian received the news from abroad and rushed over, she was already lying in a hospital bed, unable to even get up. In the end, that person could only follow her wishes and donate all of her assets to the Animal Protection Association, hoping to use his last bit of strength to give those animals a warm home. Ling Su was filled with disgust and self-blame until she died. She thought that everything was due to her negligence, but she didn't know that it was a trap set up by someone who was jealous of her. What happened to Tong Yuan in the end? She actively went to all kinds of social gatherings, using the kind people she knew to pull in large amounts of sponsorship, saying that she wanted to build a healthy home for the animals. The amount of sponsorship was huge, and most of it went into her own pocket, but these actions won her a great reputation. She even represented the city and the country at the International Animal Protection Association's convention. She was praised as the most beautiful girl in the country. All of this originally belonged to Ling Su. Gu Shengyin slowly got up from the bed. Her head was still a bit dizzy, a sign of low blood sugar after waking up. System, draw skill. A white light flashed, and a new ability appeared in Gu Shengyin's mind. The Fairy Queen? The system said in a methodical manner, due to the limitations of this world, the host has inherited the Fairy Queen's strong affinity with all animals and plants. In other words, the host can easily gain the affection of other people and animals. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment. This ability was much better than the previous world. She put on her clothes and left the room. At this time, Ling Su was just 16 years old. Her legal guardian, GC, was a distant cousin of Ling Su's. However, the two of them had never met before Ling Su's father made his will. GC lived abroad most of the time, and Ling Su lived alone in the Ling family's villa, being taken care of by the nanny and family doctor. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment. Her guardian was a typical workaholic, and he was mostly responsible for his so-called cousin. Their relationship wasn't that close, but it wasn't bad either. At least, when Father Ling found him, he didn't reject his cousin even though he knew that she was trouble. He also never coveted her assets. He could be considered a magnanimous gentleman. The fact that Ling Su could live so peacefully and comfortably was mostly due to GC's efforts. At this time, Tong Yuan hadn't seen Ling Su yet. Nothing had happened between the two of them. Everything had a chance to start all over again. Gu Shengyin went downstairs. The housekeeper had already prepared breakfast on the table. After she finished her breakfast, she went to the piano room upstairs to practice the piano for a while. After that, she took Snowball out for a walk. In the afternoon, he went to the small yard to visit the cats and dogs that he had taken in. When those small animals saw her, they all came over with incomparable friendliness and surrounded her calves, making her unable to move. Gu Shengyin could only patiently bend over and gently rub them twice. These little fellows were using their own methods to act coquettishly towards her. As expected, the little fellows that received the love and caress were all satisfied and didn't drag her any longer. Instead, they all obediently squatted by the side, staring at her with their large, watery eyes. Chapter 879. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but feel adorable. When these little fellows were first sent over, they were all skinny and small. Their bodies were dirty, and they were very afraid of strangers. But now, under the care of professionals, they were slowly becoming chubby and clingy. Gu Shengyin came here today for something. There were dozens of stray animals in this small house. She had specially hired a professional veterinarian to take care of them, so that they could deal with any unexpected situations. In addition, there were 2 keepers who were responsible for feeding them and hygiene. Usually, some volunteers who liked small animals would come to help. Under normal circumstances, the veterinarian, Zhang Quan, was in charge here. Zhang Quan was basically a part-time worker here. He had a large veterinary hospital, but it had all the necessary facilities, so he didn't need to spend a lot of effort. Relatively speaking, he spent more energy here. Dr. Zhang, I'm here today to do something. Gu Shengyin slowly told Zhang, leashing his thoughts. Zhang Quan raised his eyebrows in surprise. He didn't expect this girl to think so far ahead. Set up a foundation to get sponsorship from the government and society. Gu Shengyin was a little embarrassed when she said this. It's not that I lack money, but there's a limit to one person's power. Besides, how long can I take care of them alone? The girl's face was very calm when she said this. Her immature face was abnormally pale, but her smile was the opposite of warm. Zhang Quan had a teenage daughter who would go to high school next year. The little girl wanted more pocket money every day. Today, she went to watch a movie with her friends, and tomorrow, she went somewhere else. This girl was obviously so fragile and needed others to take care of her, but she had already used her thin shoulders to hold up the sky for many little lives. He nodded. Your idea is good. I know people in this field. I'll try to contact them for you. Gu Shengyin thanked him, then hesitantly said, Uncle Zhang, can you not say my name about this? Zhang Quan was stunned for a moment before he asked, This is a good thing for you. Gu Shengyin interrupted him with a gentle smile. But I don't need such a reputation. My life is not suitable for too many people to disturb. Uncle Zhang, this is also a small gift from me to you. In Zhang Quan's name, if this matter were to spread, it would undoubtedly be an excellent advertisement for his hospital. Zhang Quan was a good person, but he was still a businessman. Sure enough, as expected, he did not refuse. Walking out of the courtyard, Gu Shengyin let out a long sigh of relief. If this matter was successful, these small animals would undoubtedly have an additional layer of protection. Gu Shengyin could even apply for better care for them, and in that case, Tong Yuan's scheme would not succeed so easily. Just as she had said earlier, her strength alone was ultimately limited. Moreover, the limitations were too great. If something were to happen to her, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for these little fellows. Moreover, she didn't need to show up. Ling Su never wanted to rely on these animals to gain fame. Chapter 880. On the way home, Gu Shengyin saw an unexpected person on the side of the road. The young man was very thin and weak. He was squatting and hugging his knees. His head was lowered and he seemed to be thinking about something. With just one glance, Gu Xingyi's heart trembled. As she walked closer, she could see more clearly. His clothes were obviously worn for a long time. The fabric was not very good and had traces of fading and bleaching due to countless washing. His hair was also messy and unkempt. His exposed wrists were so thin that they looked like they could be broken with just a little bit of force. Gu Xingyi's eyelashes trembled. In her knowledge, that man had always been noble and domineering in every life. She had never seen him in such a sorry state. When she was bored, she had secretly fantasized about what would happen if he changed his identity. However, when she really saw him, her heart couldn't help but ache. She approached him softly. Before she could speak, the young man raised his head warily. Seeing that it was such a kind-looking girl, he was slightly relieved. Gu Xingyi deliberated over her tone. "Hello, you. Why are you here alone? Why aren't you home yet?" Shen Yan heard someone approaching and raised his head warily. It was a very good-looking young lady. His heart relaxed a little, but it was only a little. Beautiful people were not necessarily good people. He knew this very well. Shen Yan knew a total of 2 good-looking women. The first was his mother, who had abandoned him when he was 10 years old. The second was a young woman he had met not long ago. She was very good to him, so good that she was almost obedient. However, it was only almost. Although Shen Yan was young, he was much more mature than many of his peers because of his experience growing up. He had secretly followed the young woman and eavesdropped on her for a while when she was on the phone behind his back. It turned out that she was so good to him because she liked his looks. He had inherited the beauty of his mother, who had abandoned her husband and child. In the eyes of some people with ulterior motives, he had become a very profitable tool. He was so disgusted and scared that he ran far away. He didn't even go back to that street. Therefore, he did not trust Gu Xingyi's approach. However, there was another thought in his heart that was telling him that she was different from others. She wouldn't hurt you. That's right. Shen Yan couldn't sense any malice from this girl. He even wanted to get close to him. At this moment, Gu Xingyi was already rejoicing that she had drawn the skill. To be able to easily gain the goodwill of others, for the current her, it couldn't be better. Shen Yan hesitated for a moment before saying softly, I have no home. Gu Xingyi had already received the information from the system. Shen Yan was 13 years old. It seemed that his father had met with an accident when he was 9 years old. After taking care of her disabled husband for a year, her mother couldn't stand the change in his temperament. She took the family's money and went out to buy groceries on the pretext of not coming back. And he was betrayed by his wife. Father Shen, who had become sensitive and angry, vented all his negative emotions on Shen Yan. Gu Xingyi didn't want to think about what kind of life Shen Yan had experienced under the system's cold description. Chapter 881. When he was 12 years old, Shen Yan's father finally couldn't stand the torture and chose to commit suicide. He lost his second closest relative in the world. His relatives and friends were unwilling to accept a burden like Shen Yan. He became a wild child that no one cared about, and his personality became more and more withdrawn. Whether it was in school or outside, he was the target of bullying. It wasn't a coincidence that he appeared here today. There was a school event here during this period of time. The students would take out their pocket money to buy some bread and milk to share with the wanderers on the road. He sat here for several days. A bread and a bottle of milk were already a very luxurious lunch for him. Gu Xingyi's eyes stung. She took a deep breath. She followed Shen Yan's example and squatted down beside him. She seemed to be talking to herself. My parents passed away when I was 13. Now, I live alone in an empty house every day. I'm especially lonely during the day and scared at night. Shen Yan looked at her strangely. He didn't know why this kind-looking sister was saying these things to him. However, she seemed to be quite pitiful. He slowly thought to himself. This thought only existed for a moment before Shen Yan's mind calmed down. There were many pitiful people in this world. He couldn't even care about what he ate every day. How could he have the time to care about whether others were pitiful? Gu Shengyin continued slowly. So I really hope to have a brother or sister. That way, I can live with him and not be afraid when I sleep at night. Her voice was very gentle. Shen Yan couldn't help but turn to look at her. This sister was really good-looking, he thought secretly. However, she didn't seem to be in good health. At this moment, this good-looking sister turned her head. Shen Yan felt that there were stars in her eyes when she looked at him. She was facing away from the light, but no matter how many years later, Shen Yan still remembered her appearance. She smiled and said to him, "You lack a family, and I lack a brother. Why don't we form a family?" Gu Shengyi knew that she was being too anxious. Anyone who met a stranger for the first time and wanted to acknowledge him as a brother would probably think that she was crazy. But she couldn't help it, and she didn't want to. Looking at the little Shen Yan, she wanted to treat him well. In every world, it was this man who doted on her. In this life, it was her turn to treat him well. How about it? Shen Yan's first reaction was that this person was definitely up to something. His early exposure to the hypocrisy of the world made him always suspicious of kindness. He didn't believe that a stranger he met for the first time would be so kind, but what could she gain by deceiving him? Those beautiful starry eyes were looking at him expectantly. When Shen Yan looked up, he could see that her eyes were filled with his own figure. She really liked him. He could feel it. But he didn't say anything. Then, he saw that the starlight in those eyes was getting dimmer and dimmer, and the expression of the owner of those eyes also became somewhat sad. "I'm just saying you don't have to. I am willing." Shen Yan didn't know why he suddenly had such an impulse. He just didn't want to see the sad expression on his beautiful sister's face. Chapter 882. Gu Shengyin brought Shen Yan home that day. Shen Yan didn't have to worry about anyone caring about him. No one ever visited his house, and he often skipped school. In the eyes of the teachers, Shen Yan was a bad child. He often skipped class and didn't hand in his homework. No one cared about him even if they called his parents. They had basically given up on him. Gu Shengyin held Shen Yan's hand and entered the house. Shen Yan was a little resistant at first. Because this big sister's body was clean, and even had a nice fragrance. On the other hand, he hadn't bathed for 2 days, and his whole body was dirty. "I'm dirty." He wanted to dodge uneasily. Gu Shengyin grabbed his hand unquestionably. "Xiao Nian isn't dirty. Xiao Nian is the most beautiful child. Miss, this is..." The nanny, Mrs. Chong, was surprised to see her miss bring a young boy back. Gu Shengyin smiled and said, "This is Shen Yan, my brother. He'll live here from now on." Mrs. Chong was a little curious, but she didn't say anything. She was just an employee. She couldn't care less about the owner's matters. Gu Shengyin brought Shen Yan to the guest room upstairs. "You can stay here first. I'll get someone to renovate this place tomorrow. Remember to tell me what style you like." She opened the bathroom door and let Shen Yan take a shower first. Everything inside was ready-made. She even carefully found a set of pajamas. "There's no clothes at home for you to wear for the time being. I'll get someone to buy you a few sets of clothes tomorrow. You can make do with them first." Shen Yan's mind was in a mess. He sat in the bathtub in disbelief. Everything that happened in the afternoon was like a dream. Someone took his hand and said that they wanted to give him a home. He took a shower quickly because he knew that someone was still waiting for him outside for dinner. He walked out of the bathroom in a bathrobe that didn't fit him well and looked around the room. The room was very big and bright. His biggest wish for all these years was to have such a clean and bright room. Gu Shengyin knocked on the door. "Xiao Nian, Xiao Nian?" He hurriedly ran to open the door. Gu Shengyin stood outside and looked at him with a smile. "Our Xiao Nian is so handsome." Shen Yan was really good-looking. Otherwise, those people wouldn't have taken a fancy to him even though he looked so down and out. "Our little Nian." Shen Yan's ears turned slightly red because of these intimate words. He lowered his head as if to hide it, not wanting others to see him being shy. How could Gu Shengyin not know? However, she understood that boys wanted to save face. Mrs. Chong has already prepared the meal. Let's go and eat first. Gu Shengyin pulled him downstairs. However, Shan Yan grabbed the corner of her shirt. Gu Shengyin looked back at him in confusion. Shan Yan blushed and looked at her. Sister, what's your name? Only then did Gu Shengyin remember that she had not told him her name along the way. She smiled and said, My name is Ling Su. Ling as in Ling Xiao, and Su as in Chizu. After saying that, she reacted and widened her eyes. Xiao Nian, what did you just call me? Her eyes were bright as she looked at Shen Yan without blinking. She seemed a little nervous. Shen Yan suddenly smiled. The 13-year-old boy still had a kind of androgynous beauty. When he smiled, it was like the first ray of sunshine after the rain. Sister. Chapter 883. Shen Yan thought that if she didn't really care about him, how could she be so happy just because of a small title? In the years that followed, he had wondered more than once what kind of different life he would have had if he hadn't met his sister that afternoon. He didn't dare to think about it because at that time, he already had something that he couldn't lose. At that time, he was just a young man who suddenly felt the warmth that others brought to him. He was so surprised that he was a little hesitant. He was afraid that all of this was just a blurry dream. When he woke up, he would still find himself lying in that dark and damp house, surrounded by cold yellow walls, and not the warmth that he could touch now. Gu Shengyin felt his hand being held tightly all of a sudden. The force was very strong, as if the owner of the hand was trying to grab onto something. Her skin was naturally much more tender than ordinary people's, so this kind of strength was enough to make her feel pain. However, Gu Shengyin didn't care about this. Instead, she frowned and looked at Shen Yan worriedly. What's wrong, Xiao Nian? Shen Yan held her hand tightly and shook his head slightly. He was now a head shorter than Gu Shengyin. Seeing that he didn't speak, Gu Shengyin didn't ask. She just rubbed his half-dry hair with her other hand. Okay, let's go down and eat. Because Gu Shengyin had specially ordered that the dishes tonight were extra rich. During this time, Gu Shengyin kept putting food into Shen Yan's bowl. She wanted to make up for all the nutrients that he had lost over the years. A 13-year-old child looked like a 10-year-old. Sigh. Shen Yan silently looked at the mountain of food in his bowl and tried to hold back the sour feeling in his nose. Ever since her mother had left, no one had ever picked up food for her during her meal. He silently ate his rice and thought for a while. Then, he picked up a piece of braised pork trotter and put it in Gu Shengyin's bowl. He blushed and said, Sister, eat too. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment, then she smiled and said, Thank you, Xiao Nian. Let's eat together. Shan Yan was actually very full, but there was still a lot of food in his bowl. Gu Shengyin had already put down her chopsticks. Seeing him like this, she suddenly said, If you're full, don't continue. Be careful of eating too much and making your stomach uncomfortable. Her heart really ached for Shen Yan, but she was also extremely glad that she had met him so early. Otherwise, who knew how much suffering he would have to suffer alone? Shen Yan obediently put down his chopsticks. He looked at the food and felt a little reluctant. Gu Shengyin misunderstood what he meant and thought that he liked to eat it. She quickly said, Xiao Nian likes it? If you like it, I'll ask Nanny Chong to continue doing it tomorrow. Shen Yan shook his head and said softly, No, it's just that I can't bear to waste the food my sister gave me. Gu Shengyin felt a lump in her throat. She took a sip of water to cover it up and looked at Shen Yan reproachfully. If I give you a big plate of food, will you really eat it all? This child was really too lovable. At this moment, Nanny Chong came to clean up the table. When she saw Gu Shengyin's bowl, she began to nag. Miss, I've told you a few times. You have to eat less braised pork trotter. You have a big stomach. If you eat it, you'll feel uncomfortable at night. Gu Shengyin interrupted Nanny Chang's nagging and said with a smile, I know. I only ate one piece. I'll go for a walk later. I'll be fine. Shen Yan was taken aback. He saw very clearly that Gu Shengyin had been eating vegetarian dishes. The only piece of pork trotter was given to her by him. Chapter 884. Shen Yan lowered his head and tried his best to suppress the warmth that surged from the bottom of his heart. It felt good to be cherished and cared for. After dinner, the two of them walked in the garden outside for half an hour. Then, they sat on the sofa in the living room and watched TV together. Shen Yan liked this feeling very much. It was clearly the first time he and his sister had met today, but in this situation, it was as if the two of them were really a family who had always lived together. Gu Shengyin only watched for a while before she felt a little sleepy. Her body was really weak. In the past 10 years, her work and rest had been very normal. She had never slept past 10 o'clock at night. Shen Yan actually didn't pay attention to the TV. His mind had always been in a mess, and he didn't know what he was thinking. When he noticed that the breathing of the person beside him was getting lighter and lighter, he turned his head and saw Gu Shengyin leaning against the sofa with narrowed eyes. Shen Yan's gaze landed on Gu Shengyin's face and couldn't move away. He looked at her in a daze and felt that there was no one in this world who was more beautiful than his sister. There was no one better than his sister. In a daze, Gu Shengyin felt a warm body slowly leaning over. Then, slowly and hesitantly, he hugged her. This feeling wasn't bad. She moved slightly and sank into an even darker and sweeter dream. Shen Yan smiled foolishly for a while, then hugged Gu Shengyin's arm and fell asleep. When Mrs. Chong came over, she saw this scene. The TV in the living room was still on, but the adult and the child on the sofa had already fallen asleep. It was a very warm scene, but for some reason, Mrs. Chang's eyes suddenly turned sour. Didn't they look like two young beasts that had lost their protection huddling together and relying on each other for survival? Gu Shengyin woke up in her bed the next day. Her memory of last night was still stuck in the boring TV drama where the second male lead begged the female lead not to leave dejectedly. Needless to say, Mrs. Chong must have found her asleep on the sofa and sent her over. She paused. Shen Yan? When Shen Yan woke up, he was still in a daze. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the ceiling above his head. He blinked and turned around to look at the completely unfamiliar room. Finally, he realized where he was. He woke up at once. When he got up, he saw a set of clothes neatly placed beside the bed. From the coat to the underwear, it was obviously newly bought. Knowing that it was for him, he quickly changed his clothes and walked out of the room. He bumped into Gu Shengyin, who was coming out of her room. "Good morning, Xiao Yan." Gu Shengyin smiled when she saw him. Shen Yan couldn't help but smile back. "Good morning, sister." The two went out for a walk for half an hour. After breakfast, Gu Shengyin called GC. Due to the time difference, GC had just gotten off work and was eating dinner. "Cousin, I found myself a younger brother." Gu Shengyin's soft voice came out. GC flew back on the third day. He was a strict and self-disciplined person. Even here, he was still meticulously dressed in a suit and leather shoes, and his hair was neatly combed. His expression was a little serious as he looked at Gu Shengyin. "Do you know what you're doing? Adding another person to a family isn't just about adding another pair of chopsticks." Chapter 885. When he said this, he didn't hide it from Shen Yan. Shen Yan's hands clenched nervously as he looked at the man sitting opposite him. He looked very young, but his aura was very scary. This man was just sitting there, but the air around him seemed to condense with his cold and powerful gaze. No one could ignore his presence. Who was this man? Why could he interfere with his sister's decision? Shen Yan's mind was in a mess, but he looked at Gu Shengyin. At this moment, he was most concerned about his sister's answer. Gu Shengyin's expression became serious. It seemed that any frivolous attitude toward someone like GC was an insult to him. "Of course I know what I'm doing. I didn't adopt Xiao Nian on a whim. I've considered many things. She ended with one sentence. No matter what the consequences are, I can bear it. GC didn't speak for a long time. His right hand slowly rubbed the left sleeve of his suit. Gu Shengyin knew that this was a habit of this man when he was thinking. He finally said, although I'm your legal guardian, you're already 16 years old. You can be responsible for your own actions. If this is your thought after careful consideration, then... He glanced at Shen Yan, whose eyes were red because of Gu Shengyin's words. I respect your opinion. Gu Shengyin smiled lightly. After all, Ling Su was still underage. If GC, as her guardian, didn't agree to this matter, adopting Shen Yan would undoubtedly become very difficult. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. GC acted very quickly. Once he confirmed that Shen Yan would become a member of this family, he began to arrange other things for him. This included Shen Yan's household registration, school, and future plans. He only stayed here for 3 days. 3 days later, one of his assistants came to the Ling family's mansion. The assistant was obviously a professional. After chatting with the two of them, he quickly made a series of plans. In the end, Shen Yan's household register still didn't move to Ling Su's side. This was GC's way of protecting his cousin. He didn't know what Shen Yan would become in the future, but he had to let him know that he shouldn't covet the Ling family's things. Gu Shengyin was initially unhappy, but Shen Yan stopped her. I think this is good, sister. Although he didn't know much about these things, he vaguely knew that doing this would benefit Gu Shengyin. That was enough. Since Shen Yan had no objections, Gu Shengyin naturally did not insist. After everything was arranged, Gu Shengyin and Shen Yan finally became a family. Sister, I don't want to go to school. For the first time, Shen Yan, who had always been obedient, had an obvious resistance to something. Gu Shengyin, who had received the information transmitted by the system, naturally understood the reason. Shen Yan had received too much coldness and disdain in his previous school. But for a 13-year-old boy, school was the most suitable place for him. School is a good place. Trust me. Gu Shengyin patiently helped him tidy up his clothes. After thinking for a while, she said with a hint of yearning, Sister's wish has always been to go to school, but unfortunately, it hasn't been realized. Xiao Nian, can you help me make it happen? Shen Yan still had some resistance to that place, but if it was for his sister, it didn't matter if he did anything. Chapter 886. Tong Yuan had heard that there was a home for stray animals here. It was said that the director of a veterinary hospital had set up a foundation by pulling in some social sponsors, specifically to adopt the homeless animals in Nashui. How could the soft-hearted and kind-hearted Tong Yuan not come to such a place? She looked at herself in the mirror and carefully admired her outfit today. A white knee-length dress, a hat of the same color, and her long hair was loosely braided and hung softly on both sides of her neck. Very good. Completely in line with the image of a pure and gentle girl. Tong Yuan narcissistically spun around in front of the mirror. This outfit suited her very well and could set off her temperament very well. But, thinking of the place she was going to later, she frowned with some disgust. Those dirty cats and dogs would definitely dirty her dress. Looking at the gentle girl's expression in the mirror, she calmed her mind and let that face show a perfect smile, then left the room. Uncle, Aunt, I'm going out first. I won't be home for lunch. She obediently said to the middle-aged man and woman in the living room. The two of them didn't raise their heads. Tong Yuan bit her lips and went downstairs with a smile. A car was parked downstairs, and there were a man and 2 women in the car. The two of them were about the same age as Tong Yuan. Looking at them, they should be students. One of the girls with sharp eyes immediately saw Tong Yuan's red eyes. Yuan, what happened to you? Did your cruel uncle and aunt bully you again? The girl said with a face full of indignation. Tong Yuan hurriedly showed a smile. It's nothing, I was careless and sand got into my eyes when I went downstairs. In any case, this was a high-end residential area. How could there be sand? The girl said with indignation, Yuan Yuan, you're too soft-hearted and kind-hearted. Who doesn't know how that family treats you? Tong Yuan Yuan smiled awkwardly and lowered her head. The boy sitting in the driver's seat saw from the rearview mirror that Tong Yuan Yuan's hands hanging by her sides were clenched. Obviously, she didn't care as much as she looked. Okay, we're going to see animals today. Did you all bring something? He changed the topic, and the girls instantly began to talk about it. Tong Yuan Yuan sat quietly by the window with her eyes half closed. She looked very calm. It was easy for people to feel that such a girl was as gentle as water. She was such a beautiful girl, yet she had such a family of relatives who treated her so unfairly. Tong Yuan Yuan had never mentioned in front of any of her classmates that her uncle and aunt were not good to her, but she was always able to let them know that she was not doing well. Therefore, whether it was her classmates or teachers, they all knew that Tong Yuan Yuan had a pitiful background. After her parents passed away, she was taken in by her evil uncle and aunt. However, they were only greedy for the Tong family's wealth and were very harsh to their niece. In that kind of environment, she could still grow up to be so kind and gentle. It really made people feel pity for her. Therefore, Tong Yuan Yuan was very popular in school. This time, it was also her idea to come to the stray animal nails. As expected, those people praised her again, saying that she was kind-hearted and so on. Chapter 887. Tong Yuan Yuan was already numb to such compliments since she was young. These stupid people never cared about what was real and what was fake. She suddenly opened her eyes and glanced at the boy who was driving. Their class hunk, Qin Chuan, was handsome. More importantly, he came from a good family background. Tong Yuan Yuan had always wanted to get close to him. To her, although Qin Chuan's looks were somewhat attractive, it was more because of his background. When she reached adulthood next year, her uncle and aunt would definitely not return her assets to her so easily. If she had a boyfriend with a strong family background, then this matter would be much simpler. However, in the past 6 months, no matter how much she hinted at it, Qin Chuan treated her the same as other girls. He didn't show any difference. Tong Yuan Yuan was even a little discouraged. But this time, for some reason, when she suggested coming to the stray animal home, Qin Chuan, who had never liked such things, actually took the initiative to say that he had just reached adulthood. His family had bought a car for him to send them over. It was a pleasant surprise. Of course, Tong Yuan Yuan politely rejected him. Then, under Qin Chuan's insistence, she accepted his kindness. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at Qin Chuan. The other party was so focused on driving that he didn't notice her. From Tong Yuan Yuan's angle, she could see half of Qin Chuan's handsome side profile. Could it be that he suddenly agreed to this because of her? After all, she was a 17-year-old girl. No matter how anxious she was, Tong Yuan Yuan still felt her face heat up. Her hand was suddenly grabbed by someone, and the girl sitting next to her winked at her. Tong Yuan Yuan knew that she meant her and Qin Chuan. The girl quietly leaned over and asked, "Do you think Qin Chuan specially came over to be the chauffeur for you?" Tong Yuan Yuan didn't confirm or deny it. She pretended to be angry and glared at her. She whispered, "Don't talk nonsense." However, her shy expression was completely different from what she said. Under Tong Yuan Yuan's intentional or unintentional disclosure, the people around her knew that she liked Qin Chuan. Moreover, they felt that Qin Chuan was interested in her. Naturally, they didn't have any thoughts about Qin Chuan. Under such circumstances, if a girl confessed to Qin Chuan, they would think that she was shameless and stealing someone else's boyfriend. But in reality, Qin Chuan and Tong Yuan Yuan had nothing to do with each other. She, Tong Yuan Yuan, had the ability to make everyone think the way she wanted them to. Soon, they arrived at their destination. Unlike the dirty and messy environment they had expected, this place was surprisingly clean and tidy. This was a large courtyard located in the suburbs. As soon as he entered, he could see several different species of charmingly naive little guys playing with balls to amuse themselves. "Aya, are these stray cats and dogs? My snowball at home is also like this." A girl's eyes lit up when she saw this scene. The puppies were not afraid when they saw the strangers. Instead, they looked at them curiously. So cute, the girl who had spoken earlier couldn't help but want to walk forward, but Tong Yuan grabbed her hand. She didn't know why, but when she saw that this place was completely different from what she had imagined, she had a feeling that her plan had gone off track. Chapter 888. The girl looked at Tong Yuan in confusion. The animals here are all stray. Who knows if they've been vaccinated? If they get bitten. Before she could finish her sentence, Tong Yuan realized that something was wrong. This didn't sound like something the gentle and kind Tong Yuan would say. Tong Yuan was secretly angry at herself for being careless. Moreover, she could clearly feel that when she said this, Qin Chuan, who was standing at the side, glanced at her. Don't worry, the animals here have all been sent to the veterinary hospital for a checkup and vaccinated. A gentle voice came from inside. A girl in a white dress walked out of the house. When she saw them, she revealed a friendly smile. Like Tong Yuan, she was wearing a white dress. However, her dress was ankle-length, and the belt in the middle was gently tied, revealing her slim waist. Her waist-length hair was not tied up with anything, and she let it fall softly behind her ears. Her clean face was bare of makeup, but she had a beauty that was like a lotus in clear water. What a beautiful person! Tong Yuan heard her companion exclaim softly. She looked at the girl with jealousy. Long dresses were usually a test of one's temperament. Even now, she didn't dare to try on long dresses. However, this girl was different. The ankle-length dress perfectly displayed her quiet and refreshing temperament. If the two of them were equally gentle, then when others saw Tong Yuan, they might praise her and say, "What a quiet girl." However, when they saw Gu Shengyin, they could only sigh in amazement. Just by looking at her, they would feel their minds calm down. The sun shone on her fair face, giving her a peaceful feeling. Qin Chuan's eyes lit up when he saw Gu Shengyin. "Susu," he called out to her. When Gu Shengyin saw this boy, she felt a little helpless. This boy named Qin Chuan was a relative of Principal Zhang. Ever since he came here with Principal Zhang, he kept finding excuses to come here. How could Gu Shengyin not see the meaning in his eyes when he looked at her? As a teenager, Gu Shengyin was very familiar with the appearance and temperament of this body of hers. She was definitely the type that could easily arouse the interest of men. Especially after Gu Shengyin's arrival, there was an additional skill that increased favorability. Gu Shengyin had clearly hinted that she had no other feelings for him, but this Qin Chuan didn't seem to have given up. And calling her Su, since when were they so familiar with each other? Gu Shengyin smiled helplessly. Just as she was about to speak, she felt her hand being held by someone. "Are you close to my sister?" An arrogant and provocative male voice came from beside her, not giving Qin Chuan any face at all. Qin Chuan looked at the boy standing beside Gu Shengyin. He knew him. He was Susu's younger brother. This child seemed to be very hostile towards him. Every time he saw him, he didn't have a good expression. Shen Yan held Gu Shengyin's hand tightly. In the past year, he had been well taken care of. Teenage boys were growing, so his height suddenly jumped. Now that he was 14 years old, he was almost as tall as Gu Shengyin, who was 1.67 meters tall. The advantage of his appearance was completely revealed. A 14-year-old boy had already received many love letters from blushing girls in school. Chapter 889. Shen Yan, who had a vague understanding of relationships between men and women, naturally knew how Qin Chuan felt about his sister. The thought of this man wanting to get close to his sister, wanting to hold her hand, wanting to hug her, and even wanting to kiss her. Shen Yan felt a surge of hostility from the bottom of his heart. How could his sister, who treated him the best in the world, become someone else's woman? Shen Yan couldn't bear the thought that one day in the future, she would treat others as well as she treated him without reservation. She could only be good to him. Qin Chuan sneered, "Little brat, you haven't weaned yet? You're already so old, yet you're still holding on to your sister and refusing to let go?" However, before Shen Yan could speak, Gu Xingyin's expression turned cold. "Qin Chuan, please don't be so mean to a child so much younger than you." Shen Yan was the most important person to her. No matter how good her personality was, she couldn't allow others to say anything bad about him. Shen Yan felt that all his dark thoughts had turned into bubbles and disappeared with his sister's words. He couldn't help but smile as he glanced at Qin Chuan smugly. "See, in my sister's heart, I'm her most important younger brother." Qin Chuan choked at Gu Xingyin's words. He turned around and saw Shen Yan's provocative gaze. He suddenly found it funny. Why was he being so calculative with a child? Hence, he said good-naturedly, Yes, it's my fault. I shouldn't have argued with him." Gu Xingyin's expression improved. Tong Yuan, who was watching this scene from afar, felt that it was an eyesore. What did he mean by Qin Chuan was here for her? How could she not understand? Qin Chuan was clearly here for this girl. He had never been a good-tempered person in school, but he wasn't angry at all when he was humiliated in front of so many outstanding people. No one present was a fool. Everyone could tell that Qin Chuan had special feelings for Gu Xingyin. The other two girls looked at Tong Yuan worriedly. In their eyes, Qin Chuan and Tong Yuan had long been a couple. Every time they joked about this, Tong Yuan never denied it. But now, it seemed like that wasn't the case at all. Their gazes made Tong Yuan feel very sarcastic. These people must be laughing at him in their hearts, right? Usually, they were so good to him, but at this time, they were secretly laughing at him. Tong Yuan immediately detested Qin Chuan and the unfamiliar girl. "I've made it so obvious. Can't Qin Chuan tell? And that girl, if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have lost so much face today." The more she thought about it, the angrier she felt. A girl next to her saw her head down and thought that she was sad. She walked over and held her hand worriedly. Yuan, Pa." Tong Yuan slapped her hand away, glared at her fiercely, and ran away without looking back. The girl, Qin Chuan, casually glanced in the direction she left in and didn't say anything. Of course, he understood Tong Yuan's intentions. He also knew that this girl had been intentionally or unintentionally guiding others to tie the two of them together. Tong Yuan's methods were indeed not bad in the eyes of ordinary high school students, but in the eyes of someone like him, who had been raised as the heir of his family since young, it was still not enough. He had to admit that he did it on purpose when he brought them here today. That kind of pitiful self-deception shouldn't exist anymore. Chapter 890. Gu Shengyin raised her head and looked in the direction that Tong Yuan had left in. She asked Qin Chuan in surprise, "Is that your classmate? What's wrong with her?" No one felt that there was anything wrong with her words. This was because from the beginning to the end, she did not know Tong Yuan at all, nor would she know about her relationship with Qin Chuan. It was normal to ask such a question when she saw such a situation. One of the two girls looked at Tong Yuan worriedly and chased after her. The other stood where she was and looked at Qin Chuan and Gu Xingyin thoughtfully, but she did not follow. This made Gu Xingyin take another look at her. Today, Gu Xingyin came over to help bathe the cats and dogs. The stray animals here would be bathed by a professional every few days. Occasionally, when things got busy, there would not be enough manpower. At times like this, Gu Xingyin would often come over to help. "I'll help too." When the girl saw this, she came over excitedly. Gu Xingyin looked at her hesitantly for a moment. She immediately smiled and said, don't worry. I'm a professional. After all, I have a little princess at home." Afraid that Gu Xingyin would not believe her, she even washed a little cat in front of her. "Look, how is it?" Gu Xingyin smiled. The two of them sat together and bathed the little ones. Through chatting, Gu Xingyin found out that this girl's name was Su Miao. She was in the same class as Qin Chuan and Tong Yuan. This time, when Tong Yuan suggested coming here, Su Miao Miao, who had always liked animals, immediately expressed that she wanted to come too. The other girl was on good terms with Tong Yuan Yuan, so she specially accompanied her good friend here. Su Miao Miao suddenly leaned over and whispered to Gu Shengyin, the girl who ran away earlier, we always thought that she and Qin Chuan were a couple in school. After she finished speaking, she felt that her statement might be wrong, so she quickly added, actually, we have never seen Qin Chuan being intimate with her, but every time we asked, she never denied it. This meant that Qin Chuan didn't have such intentions. It was very likely that Tong Yuan Yuan had been directing and acting all along. Gu Shengyin was stunned for a moment. She understood that this girl was reminding her. She turned her head and smiled. Thank you, but I still have to say that Qin Chuan and I are just ordinary friends. Su Miao Miao was stunned by his smile. No wonder Qin Chuan likes this girl. She thought. Strictly speaking, this girl called Ling Su was the same type of beauty as Tong Yuan Yuan. In the past, it was fine just looking at Tong Yuan Yuan, but now that he looked at Ling Su, he felt that this was a girl who truly exuded a gentle temperament from her bones. Tong Yuan Yuan's appearance was mostly an act. With the help of these two people, the process of bathing the little ones was much faster. Su Miao Miao saw that Gu Shengyin was very close to those small animals. She seemed to be very familiar with this place. She asked, "Do you come here often?" Gu Shengyin nodded. "I don't have much to do usually, so I come here to take a look." Su Miao Miao glanced at her age. She should be a student like her. Why is she so free? However, she didn't ask. The two of them weren't that familiar with each other yet. On the other side, Qin Chuan, who had just returned from getting a glass of water, was stopped. "What's the matter, Nian Nian?" He was surprised for a moment and raised his eyebrows. Chapter 891. Shan Nian was still carrying his school bag. He had come here to look for Gu Shengyin after school today. He held the strap of his school bag with one hand and looked at Qin Chuan coldly. "Are we close? Please call me by my name." Qin Chuan. A rebellious child was not easy to deal with. However, on account that he was Susu's younger brother, he tolerated it. Qin Chuan nodded and looked like he had surrendered. All right. Shen Nian, why are you looking for me?" Shan Nian continued to look at him coldly. There was no extra emotion in his beautiful peach blossom eyes. "Stay away from my sister." Qin Chuan suddenly laughed out loud. "Shen Nian, are you 14 or 14 years old? Why are you still so clingy to your sister? She will marry and have children in the future. You can't stop her from interacting with anyone." Shen Nian's face flushed red. He suddenly sneered and said, "I don't care what will happen to her in the future. But now, I can be sure that as long as I tell my sister that you bullied me and that I don't like you, you can forget about getting a good look for my sister." Qin Chuan's expression became strange. He suddenly said, "Your sister has always told me that you are the most obedient and cute brother in the world. Aren't you afraid that your sister will be sad?" Shen Nian was unmoved. She won't know. His sister trusted him so much. She wouldn't believe that he would do such a thing. A strange smile suddenly appeared on Qin Chuan's face. "Then look who's behind you." Shen Nian was shocked. He turned around and saw Gu Shengyin standing quietly behind him. There was no expression on her calm face. He didn't know how long she had been standing there. "Sister." Shen Nian suddenly panicked. He didn't know what his sister would think when she saw him like this. Would she hate him? He felt that he wasn't as pure and cute as she imagined. Would she hate him? After all, she had always liked beautiful and kind things. Shen Nian's fingernails, which were hidden in his sleeves, dug into his palms. The sharp nails pierced through his flesh, bringing him heart-wrenching pain. However, he didn't care at all. This was far from comparable to the anxiety and hesitation in his heart. He didn't dare to raise his head. He was afraid to see the disgust and disappointment on his sister's face. The flow of time seemed to have become extraordinarily long. For Shen Nian, when he was 13 years old, When he heard the news of his father's death and felt the pity and sighs of everyone around him, he didn't feel as breathless as he did now. Until a pair of hands gently grabbed his hands and opened his palms with unquestionable strength. "Child, why are you so cruel to yourself? Does it hurt?" A familiar gentle voice filled with heartache rang in her ears. Shen Yan raised his head and stared at the girl who was about the same height as him. There wasn't the slightest bit of disgust on her beautiful face. Her light brown eyes were filled with heartache. Seeing him raise his head, Gu Shengyin was both angry and distressed. "It's just a small matter. Do you have to?" Her voice stopped abruptly when she saw Shen Yan's appearance. The young man in front of him stared at him without blinking. His eyes were red, as if he was about to cry in the next second. What was going on? Gu Shengyin was speechless. Immediately, she was hugged by a strong force. Chapter 892. What if the child is still so coquettish when he grows up? Gu Shengyin thought to herself, feeling both sweet and vexed. She patted his back gently without any hesitation. "Xiao Nian, what's wrong? Don't be sad." Shen Yan hugged the slender body in his arms tightly. He wasn't sad at all. On the contrary, he was very happy. After a long while, he raised his head and saw Qin Chuan standing behind them. Qin Chuan had been frowning ever since he saw the interaction between the two siblings. Although he had always known that Susu had a good relationship with her brother, it seemed like she doted on this child too much. Also, Qin Chuan tried his best to eliminate the strange feeling in his heart. The way they interacted didn't look like ordinary siblings. The moment Shen Yan saw him, a strong sense of vigilance rose in his eyes. He hadn't forgotten how this man had tricked him just now. Seeing his gaze, Qin Chuan spread his hands innocently and turned to face Gu Shengyin. "I think your brother needs to be taught a good lesson. He's so young, but he's already learned." Gu Shengyin interrupted him. "Qin Chuan, you don't have to worry about my brother's education." Qin Chuan had clearly seen her when she came here. However, he didn't remind Xiao Nian. He even intentionally or unintentionally led him to say something that would obviously displease her. It was really difficult for her to have a good impression of such a man. In other words, to Gu Shengyin, anyone who had the slightest bad intentions towards Shen Yan would be rejected by her. Shen Yan was her reverse scale. If there was anything wrong with Shen Yan, she could slowly discipline him. However, she couldn't tolerate others saying anything bad about him. Of course, she couldn't let others bully her own child. Qin Chuan didn't expect Gu Shengyin to treat him like this. In his impression, this girl was always gentle and soft when it came to any mistakes. She always had a warm smile on her face, as if nothing could cause her emotions to fluctuate. However, he didn't expect her to express her dissatisfaction so obviously with just a small joke. He still wanted to say something, but Gu Shengyin had already turned her head away. Clearly, she did not want to say anything more to him. Qin Chuan paused for a moment before finally leaving. Shen Yan looked at Gu Shengyin uneasily. "Sister." He felt that his sister was a little different today. Gu Shengyin took his wrist. "Come with me." After saying that, she took the lead and entered a room. Gu Shengyin often came to this place. She was also one of the founders of this foundation. This room was where she usually rested. She found the first aid kit, disinfected Shen Yan's wound expressionlessly, and put a band-aid on it. Shen Yan didn't need to probe to know that his sister was angry this time. "Sister, I was wrong." He admitted his mistake without hesitation. His attitude was quite good. Gu Shengyin judged in her heart and then asked, "Then tell me, where did you go wrong?" Shen Yan paused. "I shouldn't have lied. I shouldn't have threatened Qin Chuan." But that was not what Gu Shengyin wanted to hear. "What else?" Shen Yan was a little stunned. He felt that this was probably what he had done to anger his sister. Seeing Shen Yan like this, Gu Shengyin knew that he didn't get the point at all. Chapter 893. She was both angry and amused. Then let me tell you what I'm angry about. Gu Shengyin slowly said, Firstly, your defenses are too weak. What if Qin Chuan didn't just want a joke today and wanted to induce you to say something more serious? If I wasn't the one who walked over today, what kind of misunderstanding would others have of you when they heard what you said? Have you thought about it? Shen Yan wanted to speak. I won't. Gu Shengyin glared at him, and Shen Yan obediently shut up. Secondly, you shouldn't hurt yourself. Speaking of this, Gu Shengyin's heart ached. How big of a deal is this? Tell me. Don't you feel pain when your nails are digging into your flesh? If you really do something bad and I find out, will you have to harm yourself to apologize? Shen Yan stared blankly at the chattering Gu Shengyin. This was a sister he had never seen before. In his impression, his sister always had a gentle smile on her face. She was gentle and polite to everyone and everything. She never had any unnecessary emotions. She was like a perfect character who lived in a painting. Although he knew that his sister was like this mostly because her body couldn't withstand too much emotional fluctuation. But today, she made an exception for him. Looking at this person's flushed face, as if a vivid character had walked out of a painting, Shen Yan felt as if a small seed had slowly sprouted in his heart. This seed was still very small, but it was very tenacious and persistent. One day, it would grow into a towering tree, and nothing would be able to stop it. Gu Shengyin felt herself being hugged gently. It was unlike the strong hug from before. This hug was very light, as if he was afraid that he would hurt her if he used too much force. Gu Shengyin sensed something called cherish from it. The anger in her heart suddenly disappeared without a trace in this hug. But she still had to teach him a lesson. She forced herself to say, Xiao Nian, don't act coquettishly. Let me tell you, it's useless. You have to be punished for your mistake. Shen Yan hugged her waist and rubbed against her shoulder. He couldn't help but laugh. All right, little Nian will definitely obediently accept her punishment. Gu Shengyin sighed and pulled her away. Also, just because I didn't mention it in front of outsiders doesn't mean that I don't mind. Gu Shengyin looked at him seriously. Where did you learn to be so narrow-minded, huh? Are you planning to tell on me? Shen Yan's eyes flashed. In the end, he chose to tell the truth. He said honestly, I just don't like that Qin Chuan. I hate the way he looks at you. Big sister belongs to me alone. It's enough that you treat me well. You don't need anyone else. After he finished speaking, he looked at Gu Shengyin nervously. The 14-year-old Shen Yan was no longer at the age where he didn't know anything. He clearly knew how selfish and overbearing his words were. But even though he knew he shouldn't be like this, he couldn't help it. He didn't even want to hide his possessiveness from Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin was stunned. Unlike Shen Yan's worries, Gu Shengyin didn't feel that there was anything wrong with him being so possessive of her. She smiled helplessly and reached out to rub Shen Yan's hair. What are you thinking about? There's no one else. Little Nian is the most important person to me. 8 chapters. In the next 2 weeks, Ka Wenji would be especially busy. There would be all kinds of messy things, and the update time might not be stable. However, I will try my best to write 8,000 words a day. If I really can't write, I will take leave in advance and make up for it later. Good night, everyone. Moi. Chapter 894. These words were so indulgent. Shen Yan stared at Gu Shengyin in a daze. It took him a while to recover. He lowered his head slightly to hide his reddened eyes. If you spoil me like this, I might become a bad child. Gu Shengyin pretended not to see that the child was so touched that he was about to cry. She gently held his hand. Little Nian, who else can I spoil if not you? Let's go. It's getting late. Let's go home. When the two of them walked out of the courtyard, Qin Chuan was still there. When he saw the siblings walking out with smiles on their faces, he knew that this matter was over. He walked forward and said to Gu Shengyin, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Gu Shengyin smiled politely at him. Qin Chuan, it's okay. Her expression was gentle, but Qin Chuan's heart sank. This kind of attitude was clearly treating him as an ordinary stranger. Because she didn't care, she didn't blame him. He forced a smile. I'm really sorry about little Nian. At this moment, Shen Nian tugged at Gu Shengyin's hand. Sister, I'm hungry. I miss the braised meatballs that Mama Chong made. Gu Shengyin couldn't help but laugh. Okay. Little glutton, I'll get Mama Chong to make it for you when we get back. She looked at Qin Chuan. Little Nian and I will accept your apology. If there's nothing else, we'll go back first. Little Nian still has homework to do at home. She politely bade farewell to Qin Chuan and then said goodbye to Su Miao Miao, who had been standing on the other side pretending to be a sapling. Only then did she leave. Su Miao Miao sighed inwardly. According to her observation, Qin Chuan and Ling Su were like a pair of lovers. When she saw Qin Chuan turn around, she hurriedly pretended to play happily with the little cat under her hand. Qin Chuan composed himself and raised his eyebrows when he saw the girl who was engrossed in playing with the cat. Su Miao Miao, I plan to go back. Are you going back by yourself later, or should I send you back now? Su Miao Miao quickly raised her head and revealed a bright smile. Then I'll have to trouble you. What a joke. This was the suburbs. Even if he wanted to take a taxi, he would have to wait for half a day. Of course, it was better to have a free driver. Su Miao Miao reluctantly said goodbye to her friends and got into Qin Chuan's car. Qin Chuan looked at the girl through the rearview mirror. She was quite at ease. She didn't feel uncomfortable being alone with him. This feeling made Qin Chuan feel strange. Qin Chuan's handsome looks and impressive family background made him understand his own charm. He knew how attractive he was in the eyes of teenage girls. He had always been proud of his charm. This girl called Su Miao Miao had always kept a low profile in class. If she hadn't come along to see the animals, Qin Chuan wouldn't have had much of an impression of her. The brain circuits of adolescent boys were probably a little abnormal. If Su Miao Miao had felt nervous, shy, and uneasy sitting alone in the car with him, Qin Chuan might not have felt anything. But she was indifferent. Especially when Qin Chuan had just been rejected by Gu Shengyin. He was already feeling unconfident in his charm. Now, he met another girl who didn't have any feelings for him. Qin Chuan couldn't help but take the initiative to greet Su Miao Miao. Chapter 895. Su Miao Miao was happily scrolling through her phone. When she heard this, she glanced at Qin Chuan in surprise. As a nobody in class, Su Miao Miao had always been good at entertaining herself. However, this did not mean that she did not know how to communicate with others. The two of them were surprisingly compatible. Qin Chuan felt that this girl was very interesting. He had chatted with other people in the past. Most girls paid attention to those things, such as celebrities, big brands, or anime. However, Su Miao Miao was different. The two of them didn't know how the topic had changed. By the time Qin Chuan reacted, the two of them had been talking about history in the car for half an hour. Qin Chuan. The car had arrived at the address Su Miao Miao had given him. The girl didn't notice that something was wrong at all. She smiled and waved goodbye to Qin Chuan. Goodbye, student Qin. Thank you for today. Also, I enjoyed chatting with you. Qin Chuan watched as the girl got out of the car in a good mood. Soon, she was drowned in the bustling crowd. He watched for a while and couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and drove home. Gu Shengyin and Shen Yan also returned home. Sure enough, at the dining table that night, Shen Yan saw the familiar braised meatballs. Gu Shengyin even personally picked up 2 for him. Since you like it, eat more. A teenage boy was still growing. Shen Yan obediently picked up the meatballs and finished them. Actually, he didn't particularly like this kind of greasy food. Ever since he learned about Gu Shengyin's taste, he gradually began to lean towards lighter food. What he said during the day was just an excuse to leave. After dinner, Shen Yan took the initiative to pull his sister downstairs for a walk in the garden. Ever since he learned about Gu Xingyin's physical condition, Shen Yan was much more concerned about this than his sister. They had dinner at 6:30 and walked for an hour. At 7:30, Gu Xingyin came to Shen Yan's room. Shen Yan obediently began to accept his punishment. According to Gu Xingyin, even if Shen Yan's attitude was very good and she was no longer angry, he still had to be punished for what had happened today. Of course, Shen Yan's punishment wasn't corporal punishment, but it wasn't easy either. 50 push-ups. Gu Shangyin felt that this kind of punishment could not only exercise his body, but also make him suffer a little. It couldn't be better. Shen Yan didn't have any objections to her sister's words. Without another word, she started on the spot. He knew that if he was soft-hearted towards the person in front of him, he would definitely get candy after giving her a slap. Sure enough, after 50 push-ups, Shen Yan was basically exhausted. After all, he was only a teenager. This kind of thing was quite exhausting. A clean towel was handed over. Gu Xingyin snorted. "Do you know how tired you are? Let's see if you dare to do it again." Shen Yan replied quickly, "I know I was wrong. I'll be more careful next time." The two of them chatted for a while more before Shen Yan looked at the time. "Sister, you should prepare to wash up and rest. Otherwise, his rest time would be delayed again." Gu Xingyin looked at Shen Yan's serious appearance and laughed. Okay. I got it, little housekeeper." When she stood up, Shen Yanxiu suddenly stood up as well. "Is there anything else?" Shen Yan pursed his lips and said, "Sister, can I hug you?" Chapter 896. What was wrong with that? Gu Xingyin opened her arms. Shen Yan gently walked forward and gave her a hug. The aura in this embrace was so nostalgic and reluctant that he didn't want to let go. Shen Yan took a deep breath. The tip of his nose was filled with the scent that he loved the most. He raised his head slightly and saw the fair skin right in front of him. Her porcelain-white skin was extremely smooth. Even at such a close distance, he couldn't see a single flaw. Shen Yan didn't even need to think to know how wonderful it would feel to touch it. As if he was possessed, he suddenly leaned forward and gently kissed her on the side of her face. He only realized what he had done after kissing her. As if he had been electrocuted, a numb feeling came from where the two of them touched. Shen Yan froze. Until Gu Xingyin's puzzled voice came. "Xiao Nian, what's wrong?" Shen Yan looked up with a red face and saw Gu Xingyin's gentle face. She didn't seem to realize what that kiss meant. This realization made Shen Yan heave a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a little disappointed. He tried his best to put on a relaxed smile and said, "A good night kiss for my sister." Gu Xingyin smiled. "Our Xiao Nian is still a child. You're still learning how to kiss someone good night." Under Shen Yan's incredulous gaze, she leaned forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. "Good night." The door was gently closed, but Shen Yan stayed where he was for a long time. His face was a little red. It wasn't because he was shy, but because he was excited. Just now, his sister kissed him. He gently raised his hand and slowly touched the place where his sister's lips had touched. There seemed to be some warmth left behind. His other hand slowly touched his heart. It was beating crazily because of someone. The ridiculous sapling in Shen Yan's heart had begun to slowly grow. That was the desire in his heart. "Sister, it's you who gave me hope time and time again, making me feel. I feel that I'm the most important person to you. I am the most unique and unique." He smiled and slowly extended his hand into the void. Suddenly, he clenched his fist as if he had caught something. Then, his hand tightened and Shen Yan's expression became crazy and infatuated. "You're mine now." Gu Xingyin didn't know what kind of changes had happened to Nian, who was well-behaved, soft, and adorable in her home in such a short time. She was discussing a serious problem with the system. That's right, it was the kiss just now. System, I didn't lead a miner astray just now, did I? She asked with uncertainty. After all, she was sure that no matter what happened, that man would definitely fall in love with her. However, 14 years old was a little too young. She felt that she was leading a miner astray. The system didn't dare to tell her about the scene it had accidentally seen just now. It thought to itself, "Your cute little Nyen's insides are already dark." It replied calmly, "Host, what did you do? It was just a pure good-night kiss." Gu Shengyin thought about it and agreed. Based on the scene just now, unless Xiao Nian had some romantic thoughts, it was clearly just a simple good-night kiss between the two of them. Chapter 897. The next morning, nothing seemed to have happened between the two of them. They had breakfast together happily. Student Shen. Before Shen Yan could reach the classroom door, he was stopped by someone. It was a petite and cute girl. She seemed especially nervous. She lowered her head slightly and didn't dare to look at Shen Yan. Her ponytail trembled. Shen Yan looked at the pink envelope in her hand and understood what was going on. He looked at the girl with some criticism. Her hair isn't as long as sister's, her skin isn't as good as sister's, her voice isn't as gentle as sister's, and her temperament isn't as good as sister's. In short, in this world, sister is the best and most beautiful girl. The girl finally mustered the courage to look up. The moment she saw Shen Yan, her face turned even redder. Looking at him from such a close distance, Shen Yan seemed even more handsome. She stuttered, "Student Shen Yan, I like." Shen Yan's clear and pleasant voice slowly entered the girl's ears. He cruelly interrupted her confession before she could finish. "I already have someone I like." The girl's face turned pale when she heard this. The envelope in her hand was squeezed out of shape. She lowered her head sadly. When she looked up again, Shen Yan had already left. A boy in Shen Yan's class was secretly looking over. He giggled and muttered, "How many girls has Shen Yan rejected? He actually doesn't like such a beautiful junior. I wonder what kind of girls he likes." But when Shen Yan came in, they shut up. This Shen Yan always gave off an inexplicable aura. When he glanced over, the boys felt that his gaze was even scarier than the form teacher's. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. 2 years. Gu Shengyin had officially become an adult last year, and GC had acted quickly. Not long after she turned 18, he had transferred all his assets to her name. He had even hired a professional financial advisor for her, set up a trust fund, and a series of other things. With Gu Shengyin's body, she didn't have enough energy to manage these things. "Sister, good morning." The moment Gu Shengyin stepped out of the door, she received a refreshing morning hug. In the past 2 years, Shen Yan seemed to have taken some kind of miracle medicine. Gu Shengyin could barely stand shoulder to shoulder with him before, but now she could only reach his shoulder. At this speed, Gu Shengyin estimated that it would not be a problem for him to reach 9 meters. Shen Yan restrained his desire to not let go. He forced himself to let go of the person in his arms and took a step back. Today was the first day of the first year of high school. The class asked every student to invite their parents. Gu Shengyin decided to go to their school to have a look. Shen Yan was a little worried. "Sister, are you okay?" He knew that when his sister was young, the family doctor would rush over every 2 to 3 days because of her poor health. Therefore, she had never gone to school and had always hired a private tutor. She looked much better now, but there were many people in the school and it was noisy. With her sister's health, she could catch a cold with a sneeze. He was really worried. Gu Shengyin shook her head and said leisurely, "Don't think of me as so weak." As expected, the moment Gu Shengyin arrived in class, he was like a clear stream among the middle-aged parents who had put on weight. Every boy in puberty had a long-haired goddess in white clothes living in their hearts. Gu Shengyin's appearance perfectly satisfied their dreams of a goddess. Chapter 898. F*ck, I finally know why Shen Yan has such high standards. It turns out that you have such a goddess at home. No wonder you don't like those girls. Shen Yan's deskmate whispered to him enviously. Teenagers were the most fearless. Many boys even ignored the presence of the form teacher and surrounded Gu Shengyin. Hello, sister. I'm XXX, Shen Yan's classmate. Sister, you're so beautiful. Sister, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have any requirements for a boyfriend? Shen Yan's face darkened as he listened. These guys, his sister was his only sister. What right did they have to call her sister? Just as he was about to lose it, the form teacher couldn't stand it anymore and coughed heavily. The form teacher's authority was still very strong. The boys returned to their seats with smiles. Gu Shengyin heaved a sigh of relief. These enthusiastic children didn't have any bad intentions towards her. It was simply too overwhelming. Shen Yan hurried forward and led Gu Shengyin to sit beside him. There was no expression on his face, but Gu Shengyin, who was familiar with him, knew that he was angry. What's wrong? She turned to ask him. Shen Yan said sullenly, You're my sister. These words turned in Gu Shengyin's heart before she reacted. It turned out that he was jealous. She laughed in her heart. He was indeed a little boy who hadn't grown up. He was still unhappy about this. She gently held Shen Yan's hand. Your classmates are all joking. To be honest, when Shen Yan's classmates greeted her one after another, she was actually very happy. Because of Shen Yan's past experience, she was always afraid that it would affect his personality and cause him to be unsociable in the new school. But now it seemed that Shen Yan had adapted well in the new school. Shen Yan lowered his head and didn't say anything. Of course, he knew that those people were just joking. They should be glad that they were just joking. Otherwise, but even if it was just a joke, he still felt very uncomfortable when he heard those words. He regretted not stopping his sister from coming to school. He should have known that his sister was such a beautiful person. No one who met her would not like her. He wanted to hide such a beautiful sister and not let anyone have the slightest chance to touch her. He was the only one who knew, saw, and felt such a wonderful sister. That would be enough. When he heard Gu Shengyin softly calling his name, his heart skipped a beat. He put away all the dark thoughts in his eyes, and when he raised his head again, he had already returned to his usual obedient and quiet self. What's wrong with you? Why are you so distracted today? Gu Shengyin asked curiously. Shen Yan smiled embarrassedly. Sister, this is your first time coming to our school. I was wondering where I should bring you to later. So it was this. Gu Shengyin didn't care and said, Just walk around. There are so many people today. I don't think I can take a good look. Shen Yanji agreed wholeheartedly. If it were up to him, the two of them could have gone home earlier and enjoyed some time alone together. However, this was just a thought. It was rare for his sister to come to school. Naturally, she wanted to see where he went to school. After the parent-teacher meeting, Gu Shengyin and Shen Yan slowly walked around the school. Chapter 899. From time to time, students would turn around to look at the two of them. After all, both of them were far more good-looking than average. Furthermore, Shen Yan was known as the school hunk in school. The school hunk walking together with a beautiful girl was not a small piece of news. As Gu Shengyin walked, she sized up her surroundings. Although it was her first time here, she had chosen this place after a long time. The tuition fees of a private elite school were frighteningly expensive. However, regardless of whether it was the environment or the quality of the teachers, it was worthy of the price. Senior, what's wrong? Tong Yuan stood there until someone called her. She came back to her senses. She smiled and pretended to be puzzled. I just saw two people walking past here. Who are they? The boy who was asked was obviously a little excited. He said, Senior, you're in the 3rd year of high school, so you don't know. That boy is a freshman this year. His name is Shen Yan. The girl beside him is said to be his sister. She's here to attend the parent-teacher conference today. He told Tong Yuan what she wanted to know in a few words. Tong Yuan smiled politely at him. Okay, I got it. Thank you. The boy left with a dreamy look on his face. Just now, the famous gentle senior in the 3rd year of high school talked to me and even thanked me. He felt that he could brag about it when he returned to the dormitory. Tong Yuan stood alone at the corner of the flower bed, coldly looking in the direction the two of them had left. Ling Su. How could she forget this name? At that time, it was because of that accident that the perfect situation that she had deliberately created for so long was destroyed without a trace left. Moreover, on the 2nd day she returned to school, everyone knew that she had nothing to do with Qin Chuan. Even if they did, it was just her one-sided love. Tong Yuan was popular in school, but there were also many people who disliked her. At that time, she was mocked by several people in front of her. In the end, she relied on the image she had been building to successfully smooth things over. However, the embarrassment and humiliation of being forced into a corner were deeply imprinted in her heart. The person Qin Chuan truly liked was Ling Su. She couldn't forget it. Although she had never heard anyone mention that Qin Chuan had a girlfriend, she had kept this matter to herself. But today, when she suddenly saw Gu Shengyin, those things that she had deliberately forgotten surfaced one after another. She stood by the flower bed for a long time until the bell rang. Only then did she hurry back to the classroom. In fact, when Tong Yuan appeared, Gu Shengyin had already noticed her presence. However, she ignored her. The Animal Home Foundation had already developed to a certain scale, and its influence had also reached a certain height. It had even appeared several times in the social news. Chapter 900. After hanging up the phone, Tong Yuan slowly smiled. She didn't know why this mysterious person was looking for her. At first, she had some doubts, but later, after learning a lot about her uncle and aunt's secrets and making her life better, Tong Yuan treated him as a secret weapon. Anyway, there was only a simple relationship between the two of them. She would pay, and he would provide information. It was that simple. The mysterious person had always been very efficient. The next morning, she woke up. Tong Yuan found that there was a lot of information in her mailbox. It was all about Ling Su. Tong Yuan only read one page, and her expression froze. She quickly flipped to the back until all the content was over. It turned out that this girl had the same background as her. They were both unlucky, but she was much luckier than her. She was taken in by a family of locust-like relatives. Not to mention the comfort of family, it was already quite good that she didn't suffer from cold treatment. But what about Ling Su? Her father had made plans for her early on and entrusted her to someone he could truly trust. It was the same experience. She lived under someone else's roof, but Ling Su grew up like a princess and never had to worry about anything. Why? They were both humans, but why was there such a big difference in their lives? He was still struggling and haggling over those assets, but what about her? As soon as she turned 18, she couldn't wait to transfer all the wealth under her name to her. She even planned for her future. Ling Su only needed to be a carefree young lady. The wealth left by the Ling family was enough for her to spend in 10 lifetimes. The more she thought about it, the more indignant Tong Yuan felt. As for Ling Su's younger brother, Shen Yan, he was simply mentioned. This information only said that he was a child adopted by Ling Su. He didn't even have a household register with the Ling family, so he naturally had no inheritance rights in the future. He looked like an unfavored adopted son. However, Tong Yuan recalled the 2 times they met, and how they interacted. She narrowed her eyes. It didn't look like they had a bad relationship. She called the mysterious man again and asked him to send her a detailed copy of Shen Yan's information. She also gave him a new price. Tong Yuan finished reading at a glance, and a plan formed in her mind. It seemed that although these 2 siblings were not related by blood, after all, they had depended on each other for so many years. Their relationship was definitely not something that ordinary people could compare to. Perhaps Shen Yan's side was a good breakthrough point. Shen Yan had no idea that he had been targeted. He was standing at the door of the classroom, looking at one of his classmates with an expressionless face. "Hey, Shen Yan, I'm telling the truth. It's true. I fell in love with your sister at first sight. I'm definitely sincere." The boy looked at him sincerely. "I'm already 17 years old, and I've never been so sad about a girl before. The first time I saw her, my heart felt like it was struck by an electric current. It was numb." The boy was still reminiscing. Shen Yan was still expressionless as he walked around him, intending to leave. His hands were tightly clasped together in his sleeves. If he didn't leave, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't do such a thing. Who was it that dared to covet his sister? "Elder sister, obviously can only belong to me." You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.